Montana Territory, July 1878. The first time he sat on her porch, it was just after sunrise, and the mountains behind her cabin were still holding on to the night's chill. Brielle Vaughn opened the front door with a rifle in her hands, her jaws set hard. "You lost?" The cowboy tipped his hat. "No, ma'am." She took him in dust-scuffed boots, sunburnt neck, and a canvas satchel slung over one shoulder. His shirt was clean, but the edges frayed. He looked like he had not slept in a bed for weeks. "I do not take in strays," she said. "Move along." He nodded once, but did not stand. Instead, he settled back against the porch post, as if he had been invited. His wide shoulders rested easy, but there was a kind of weight in his stillness. Like he had nowhere else to go. "I just need a place to sit for a while," he said. "Not asking for more than shade." Brielle stared him down. "Name?" "Kallen Lowell." Her grip on the rifle eased, just a little. "You from around here?" "No, ma'am. Came up through Wyoming. Heard there was work in Helena. But I got turned around near the river crossing, and I ended up here." He looked out toward the hills. "Not planning on staying where I am not wanted." She hesitated. The way he said it, soft but certain, told her this was not a man used to begging. But still, he sat there like he meant to wait her out. She finally lowered the rifle. "There is a water pump out back. You can fill your canteen and move on. I will, once I rest a bit." She stared at him again, but this time, she shut the door and left him there. By noon, he was still there. Brielle watched from the kitchen window while she kneaded bread dough. He had not moved much. Just sat there, quiet, arms on his knees. He had taken off his hat and left it beside him, revealing dark hair and a scar above his brow. She hated that she noticed the scar. She hated more that the porch had not felt empty in 4 years, and now it did not. Her 2 children, Jonah and Josie, had been napping in the back room. When they woke, she gave them lunch and peeked out again. Still there. She opened the door with her hands on her hips. "You planning to set up camp out here?" He stood up, brushing off his trousers. "If it bothers you that much, I will go." She frowned. "You want something to eat?" He blinked, clearly surprised. "Not asking for it." "I did not ask if you were asking." She turned and walked inside again. "You want it or not?" He followed her in. Kallen did not say much while they ate. He took his time with the stew, chewing slow like he had not had a hot meal in days. The children watched him in silence. Josie, age 6, clung to Brielle's side. Jonah, 8, leaned forward with curiosity. "You got any kids?" Jonah asked. Kallen shook his head. "No, you married?" "No, were you?" "No." Jonah squinted. "You are real quiet. That a bad thing?" "No," Jonah said softly. "Just strange." Brielle narrowed her eyes at her son but did not correct him. Kallen glanced at her, and there was something in his gaze not hard, not pleading. Just careful. Like he was trying not to step on anything fragile. After supper, Kallen stood. "Thank you for the meal. I will be on my way." Josie frowned. "Where will you sleep?" He looked down at her. "Under the stars. Do you not get scared?" "Sometimes." She stepped closer. "You could stay on the porch. Just for tonight." "Mama lets the dog sleep there too." "We do not have a dog anymore," Brielle said sharply. Kallen looked like he might smile, but he just nodded. "If that is all right with your mother." Brielle crossed her arms. "One night. Then you move on." That night she did not sleep well. She checked the lock on the door twice. She made sure the rifle was loaded. But she also set a blanket and a tin cup out on the porch, and left the lantern burning. In the morning, he was still there. The second day, he chopped wood without her asking. The third, he fixed the chicken coop's broken gate. The fourth, Josie caught him teaching Jonah how to tie a proper knot. Each time she tried to tell him to leave, something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he never asked for anything. Maybe it was how the children had started laughing again. Or maybe it was how, when she caught him looking at her, he always looked away first. On the 6th day, it rained. Kallen sat on the porch, soaked, arms crossed against the cold. She watched him from the window while she dried the children's hair by the fire. He did not complain. Did not knock. Just sat. She opened the door and glared at him. "You are going to catch your death out there. Your porch, your rules." She clenched her jaw. "You are an idiot." He nodded once. "Most days." She stared at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." He did. He never left again. Not after that night. Not after he helped mend the barn roof. Not after Jonah asked him if he could call him Sir instead of Mr. Not after Josie started leaving him wildflowers at his plate. And not after Brielle, one evening while folding laundry, asked him without looking up, "You planning to stay through winter?" Kallen reached over and took the towel from her hands, folding it slow. "I will stay as long as you let me." She met his eyes. "I do not want a man coming around just to leave again." "I will not." She swallowed. "What are you looking for, Kallen?" He took her hand, rough fingers closing around hers, gentle and steady. "Home." She looked down at their hands, then back at him. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Then stay." The wind shifted late August, bringing with it the dry scent of pine and distant smoke. Somewhere west, a storm had passed through, and the air carried the tang of wet stone and scorched earth. Brielle stood by the corral, sleeves rolled to her elbows, watching Kallen tighten the leather girth on the mule. His hands moved with quiet certainty, the kind that didn't need announcing. She cleared her throat. "You ever worked cattle?" He didn't glance up. "Drove a herd through Nebraska once. Lost half to fever, 2 to lightning. Still got paid. Paid enough to keep going? Paid enough to learn better." He gave the strap a final tug. "You got cattle?" 2 milk cows. One's dry. The other's old enough to remember the war. Still, better than fever. She didn't argue. Behind them, Jonah and Josie's laughter floated from the stream bed. They were stacking stones, building something that looked like a fort. Brielle watched her son show his sister how to balance the wide ones, how to keep the corners from crumbling. It used to be she could only get him to speak in whispers. Now his voice carried. Kallen followed her gaze, then stepped back from the mule. "That boy of yours," he said. "He ever ride?" "Not far. Not fast. He's got the hands for it. Gentle, but sure." She crossed her arms loosely. "He's got his father's quiet." Kallen looked at her sidelong. "Is that a good thing?" She didn't answer right away. "Depends on the day." He nodded once, not asking more. They spent the rest of the afternoon mending fence. Wire had rusted through near the north post, and the pine slats had bowed under last winter's snow. Brielle held the boards steady while Kallen drove the nails. His coat was slung over the gate, and the sweat darkened the back of his shirt. She didn't look long, but she noticed how he never missed a nail. "You always work like that?" she asked. "Like what?" "Like you're trying to outrun something." He paused, hammer resting against his knee. "If I am, it's been chasing a long while." "You think it'll catch you?" He met her eyes. "Only if I stop." She adjusted her grip on the board. "Then don't." By dusk, the fence stood straight and clean. Kallen wiped his hands on his trousers and looked toward the hills. The sun had dropped low, setting the sky behind the cottonwoods a soft gold. Cicadas buzzed under the dry hush, and somewhere a whippoorwill called. Inside, Josie was setting the table. She hummed as she worked, a tune Brielle didn't recognize. Kallen stepped in behind her, leaned to wash at the basin. He used little water, careful with it. She noticed that too. Later, while the children slept, she found him sitting on the back step. He had one boot off, the other still laced, and a tin cup resting on his knee. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "Was thinking. Dangerous habit." He smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Your boy asked me if I ever had a father. What did you tell him?" "That I don't remember him. Truth is, I do. Just not the way I'd like." She leaned beside him, careful not to brush his arm. "Mine died in Illinois. Fever took him before I was old enough to ask the right questions. I used to think I'd be the kind that left a good memory behind. You still can." He looked over, and for the first time since she'd let him in, there was no caution in his gaze. Just quiet hope, raw and unpolished. "Brielle," he said, voice low, "you ever think about what comes next? Next? After the fences are mended. After the roof holds through winter. After the children don't watch me like I might vanish." She looked out across the dark pasture, then back at him. "I think about tomorrow. That's as far as I go." He nodded, slow. "Is there room in tomorrow for me?" She didn't answer right away. She looked down at his boot, still untied, and then at his hand wrapped around the tin cup, strong, weathered, steady. "There might be," she said. He didn't move closer, didn't reach for her. Just sat with the question open between them, like the stars overhead, distant, steady, waiting. And she didn't shut the door when she went in. By early September, the creek ran lower, and the cottonwood leaves faded to the color of old brass. The kitchen held the scent of dried mint and root vegetables strung from the rafters. Brielle moved through the days with sleeves rolled and skirts dusty, her hands always busy sealing jars, stitching worn knees, setting traps near the shed for the fox that had taken 2 hens. Kallen had built a smokehouse behind the barn. He didn't ask before he started, just cleared the space, laid stone for the floor, stacked greenwood for the frame. She watched from the window as he worked, his back bent, not speaking unless spoken to. But he whistled sometimes, low and tuneless, when he thought no one could hear. She caught him like that one morning, boots damp with dew, sleeves rolled to the elbow, lifting the roof beam into place with a quiet rhythm. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed but not in warning. "You always build things when you're unsettled?" she asked. He paused, then stepped down from the crate he was using for height. "Better than letting it sit in my ribs." She nodded once, then looked past him. "You plan to smoke meat you haven't hunted yet?" "I was thinking of curing salt pork. Maybe venison, if the season holds." "You know how to salt meat?" "My mother did. I watched her enough times." Brielle hesitated. "You talk about her like she's still out there. She's under cotton soil now. Same as my sister." She didn't ask what happened. She didn't have to. "You're not the type to sit still," she said. "I could be." "If what?" "If there's reason." She met his gaze, and for a moment neither looked away. That evening, Jonah came in with a scrape down his arm and a tightness around his mouth she hadn't seen in months. "What happened?" she asked, kneeling. "Fell," he muttered. Kallen crouched beside them. "Where?" "By the bluff. I was trying to see where the hawks nest." Brielle tied a strip of linen over the cut, her voice low. "You're not to go near the bluff alone." "I wasn't alone." Jonah's chin trembled. "Josie was with me." Kallen stood. He was out the door before she could stop him. Josie was found just past the edge of the woodline, crouched by a thicket of chokecherry. She looked up when she heard steps. "I wasn't lost," she said. He crouched beside her, his voice level. "You see your brother fall?" She nodded. "He told me to wait." "So I did." "You get scared?" "I didn't cry." "That's not what I asked." She finally met his eyes. "A little." He offered her his hand. She took it. Back at the house, Brielle held both of them longer than she meant to. After she put them to bed, she found Kallen out by the smokehouse again, fitting the door hinges with care. "You didn't raise your voice," she said. He didn't look up. "Didn't see the point. Most men would have." "I'm not most." She walked closer. "You've got away with them. They listen because I don't shout. You already do enough of that for the both of us." She tried not to smile. Maybe I do. The wind picked up, rustling the drying leaves. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote called once, then fell silent. You ever think about what it means? He asked, still focused on the hinge. What means? Being needed. She watched as he straightened, wiped his hands on his trousers. I used to think I was only good for passing through, he said. Now I'm not so sure. She stepped close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. You're not passing through, Kallen, she said. Not anymore. He looked down at her, and this time, when their eyes met, either of them looked away. By late September, the first frost kissed the squash leaves, and the mornings came in pale and quiet. Brielle had taken to rising before the children, lighting the stove while the sky was still indigo, listening to the stove pop and settle as it warmed from its slumber. Kallen was often outside by then, splitting the last of the pine logs they'd hauled down from the ridge, the steady rhythm of axe on wood keeping pace with the waking day. He didn't ask where she stored her grief, and she didn't ask what drove him to stay near the fence line some nights, just past the reach of the lantern's glow. Some things earned their silence. That afternoon, he brought in a pail of apples from the tree near the dry creek. He set them on the table, his sleeves damp from the wet grass, and looked at her with something expectant. You ever make cider? He asked. She leaned against the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. Not since the year Josie was born. Think we could manage it? She gave a slow nod. If the press still works. They hauled it out from the back of the shed, where it sat under burlap and cobwebs. The wood was dry but sound, the iron crank stiff but willing. The children helped scrub it clean, their hands red from the cold water drawn from the well. By supper time, the first of the cider was stored in jugs and set out to cool against the cellar wall. The skins and mash were tossed to the pigs, and the scent of crushed fruit lingered under everyone's fingernails. After the children were asleep, Brielle stood at the table, peeling the last of the apples for drying. Kallen dried the press rag by the stove, his shoulders lit in the flicker of firelight. You ever think about marrying again? He asked without turning. She didn't answer at first, just set another curl of peel aside. I think about what would come of it, she said. How it'd change things for the children. For me. And? They've already lost once. I wouldn't bring someone into their lives unless I was sure it'd hold. He hung the cloth, then turned to her. What if it's already holding? She looked up. That what you're asking me? I'm not asking anything yet, he said. Just saying I'd like to. She watched him for a long beat. You'd take on what's already here. No starting clean. He stepped closer, but not enough to crowd her. I didn't come looking for clean. I came looking for real. Her voice lowered. You'd take the weight of someone else's past? I'd carry it beside mine. She set down the knife. Her hands were still red from the cider work, her palms nicked from the day's chores, but they didn't shake. Then I think, she said softly, we might be thinking the same way. He didn't reach for her not yet, but his eyes held steady on hers, and in them she saw the kind of promise that didn't need grand words. Outside, a wind brushed the porch, dry leaves scraping along the steps. Inside, either of them moved from where they stood. But something between them settled deeper, like the roots of a tree finding their way through stone. The snow came early that year. Not heavy, but enough to soften the edges of the land, dusting the hills and weighing down the dry branches of the cottonwoods. The air turned sharp, and boots tracked frost across the cabin floor before dawn. Brielle had set the last of the preserves in the root cellar, and was mending Jonah's winter coat on the porch when Kallen returned from the eastern ridge with a brace of rabbits slung over his shoulder. His cheeks were wind-bitten, and his breast showed white, but his eyes found hers before he stepped onto the boards. You said the snares wouldn't hold past the first freeze, he said, setting the game down. I said they needed tightening, she corrected, threading her needle again. Glad to see you listened. I'd listen to you even if you were wrong. She gave him a look dry but warm. That's a poor way to live. Maybe. But I figure there's worse ways. Inside, Josie crouched near the hearth, arranging pine cones in a row like sentries. She looked up as he passed. "Did you see the elk?" she asked. "Too far off. But they'll move closer the colder it gets. Are they still up near the canyon?" "They were," he said. Tracks were fresh. Jonah leaned in from the table without lifting his pencil. "You think they'll come down before snowfall sticks?" "Likely." Brielle set the coat aside and brushed her hands clean. "If they do, we'll need to be ready. The smokehouse is not full yet." Kallen gave a quiet nod. "I'll take Jonah with me next time. If that's all right." She watched her son glance up, hope flickering behind his careful expression. "He's ready," she said. That night, after the children had gone to bed and the wind had stilled, she found Kallen in the lean-to behind the barn, checking the bindings on the sled runners. He'd built it from scrap oak and pine fitted together with iron bolts, the kind of work that would last through storms and hauling. "You planning to take that up the canyon?" she asked, stepping into the dim. "If the elk fall, we'll need to carry more than we can drag." She reached out and ran her hand along the smooth edge of the sled's side rail. "You've built a great deal in a short time. I only build where I mean to stay." She didn't answer, not right away. The air smelled of cold wood and horses, and somewhere a mouse rustled in the hay. "I've been thinking," she said finally, "about the land." He looked up. "I have the deed. 40 acres, clear to the creek bend. But I can't manage it all alone. Not properly. Not without help." Kallen leaned back on his heels. "You're not alone now." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm saying it." She pulled a folded paper from her skirt pocket, worn soft at the edges. "I had it drawn up in town. Your name beside mine on the land. If you want it." He didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, he took the paper, holding it as though it might tear from too much breath. "You sure? I don't offer what I don't mean." He looked at her, and something settled in his face, quiet, certain, unshaken. "I'll sign it." She let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Good." He stepped closer, the paper still in hand. Brielle. Her name had never sounded like that before. Not cautious. Not distant. Just full. She met his eyes. "I've wanted to ask you something," he said. "But I didn't know if I'd earned it yet." "You've earned more than you know." His voice was low. "Will you marry me?" She stepped into him until she could feel the warmth of him through her shawl, and laid her hand against his chest. "Yes." He kissed her, slow and reverent, like the first light over snow. There was no rush in it, just steadiness, and belonging, and the kind of love that grew from soil and shelter and shared days. They married on the first clear morning after the second snow. The preacher from the town over came by sleigh, and Jonah wore his father's old boots, too big but shined. Josie scattered pine needles instead of petals, and the neighbors brought jars of honey and dried corn and a quilt stitched by 4 hands. Brielle wore her mother's locket, and Kallen carved their initials into the doorframe before sundown. That winter they filled the smokehouse with elk and rabbit and salted pork. The sled carried wood and water and laughter. Kallen taught Jonah to track by shadow and wind, and Josie started reading beside the fire with her head against her stepfather's knee. Brielle no longer lit the stove alone in the mornings. Some days she rose to find the kettle already hot, the bread turned out and rising under cloth. She would stand quietly in the doorway and watch him. Her husband stooped over the table, his hair still damp, his hands never idle. And in those moments she knew peace had come. Not loudly, not with grand promise, but like a gate swinging open on well-oiled hinges. They lived long on that land. The kind of long that sees children grown, and tools worn smooth, and stories passed down with the scent of smoke and cider. The kind of long that never needed to be explained. And through all of it, they were together. Always.